When it comes to video game enemies, for the most part, the focus is always on the bosses. We've covered the punch-your-TV difficult ones hundreds of times over, but just because they're the villains who get their own arenas, music, and introductions doesn't mean they're more important than the regular enemies that players spend far more time dealing with. After all, a bad, unfair boss fight might get you all hot and bothered, but you know that once you beat them, you won't have to go through the ordeal again. Well, for the most part anyway. The same cannot be said for regular goons though, who will instead constantly show up to ruin your day no matter how many you've killed, leaving you wondering whether or not you'll even see the end of the game because you're more likely to have snapped your controller in half in pure, unbridled rage. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 unfair video game enemies that made you rage quit. Number 10. The Ghostfish, Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden is already a punishing series, so there's really no need for the Ghostfish, who have haunted players across a bunch of the games, to actually exist. These piranha-like scamps are invisible right up until a point where they're not, which is when they're just about to swarm you with a series of unblockable attacks. That's right, this isn't a case of panicking when they appear and going on the defensive, as they can unfathomably break through your guard and absolutely rinse you of health. Until you really master Ninja Gaiden's gameplay and make it a point to nullify these bastards as much as possible, even experienced players will be caught off guard at some point, taking a few undeserved hits every single time they show up. Invisible enemies are bad enough, but ones that hit you no matter what? I'm calling the police. Number 9. Banshees, Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect isn't really known for its combat, and the most generous thing you can say about it, even at its peak in the third game, is that it's pretty competent. Enemies had weaknesses to exploit, the player had a wide arsenal at their disposal, and the level design was full of perfectly proportioned chest-high walls to hide behind. The one enemy that totally threw a spanner into the gears, though, was the Banshee. These twisted Asari are some of the most fierce and aggressive enemies in the entire series, and the amount of tricks they have up their hypothetical sleeves can make fighting against them unbearable. Entering the battlefield from afar, it's best to keep that distance, otherwise you'll be treated to an up-close and personal insta-kill grab attack, which absolutely sucks. Doing that is easier said than done though, as an erratic teleport move closes the gap far too quickly, forcing you out of cover where you'll no doubt be shot to pieces by the other enemies. Oh, and if you do start to chip away at the Banshee's health, its shields will regenerate the moment you're not looking, so good luck. Number 8. OGGDO BOGDO, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. There were a couple of enemies that could have made it onto this list from Fallen Order, including those sneaky Night Brothers on Dathomir, but OGGDO BOGDO's infamy reached unprecedented levels when the title launched in 2019. Found in the game's primary hub world, this sub-boss guarded a nifty piece of loot. Admittedly, this frog fella is clearly designed to be battled at a higher level than players usually are when they first arrive. But that didn't stop everyone from throwing themselves at it in a vain attempt to get a victory. So while OGGDO gets the gold here, think of him as a stand-in for every other time this enemy species turns up, which is far too often for my liking. Those ranged tongue attacks combined with stamina-depleting bashes can make a meal of even experienced Jedi Masters, leaving you wondering how someone wielding the full power of the Force could get pounced by a big toad. Number 7. MALBORO, Final Fantasy. One of the most popular unfair enemies on this list, MALBORO is infamous amongst Final Fantasy fans, and has shown up in a bunch of the games to keep his legacy as the ultimate bringer of pain alive and well. Ask any fan and they'll tell you just how much they loathe this monster's bad breath move, which can inflict multiple status effects on the player's party. Consequently, before the fight has properly even begun, you can find yourself on the back foot, with your party sent berserk, poisoned, confused, or any other effect that essentially means you have to wrestle with your own team before you can even think about taking this beast on properly. This lethal unpredictability is what makes battles so frustrating, and taking on this disease of an enemy never gets less annoying. Number 6. Woo Guy, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I've tried to limit the amount of From Software examples on this list because from the Archers in Dark Souls to Bloodborne's werewolves, the developers' games aren't lacking in enemies that make you shut the console off. That said, Woo Guy, as he's affectionately become known on the internet, is probably the point everyone took an extended break away from Sekiro on their first playthrough. During one stretch, you're forced to climb the game's towers in order to fight Genichiro, and the precarious roofs on the way leave you wide open to attacks that can send you flying back down to the ground below. below. It's at this point then that the developers decided to add in flying ninjas that throw projectiles at you from afar. Not only are these guys incredibly powerful already, but they have an ace up their sleeve in the form of WooGuy, who appears from the heavens just when you think you're free to strike you down. Even when you know he's out there, he will still kill you as well, as you'll no doubt be too busy dealing with other enemies to correctly judge his attack. Number 5. Lurkers, Resident Evil 0. Oh boy, were the older Resident Evil games no stranger to infuriating enemy types, which were seemingly designed to work against the fixed camera angles and tank controls the releases were actually built around. Anything that moved quickly, had an extended range, or required quick reflexes were essentially death machines that, even if they didn't kill you, would make a first aid spray essential to get to the next area. Enter the Lurkers then, who showed up first in Resident Evil 0. They're not the most imaginative enemies, I mean, they're pretty much just big frogs, but what they lacked in visual flair, they more than made up for in aggressive cheapness. The problem with these slippery toads is that they essentially attack you with hit-and-run moves, leaping to your level, tripping you up with their tongues, giving you OGGDO BOGDO flashbacks in the process, and then scampering off. Consequently, actually standing your ground and fighting is essentially a death wish, and the only real course of action is to run as fast as you can and pray that the lurker keeps its tongue in its filthy, filthy mouth. Number 4. The White Cougar, Red Dead Redemption 2. On a lot of lists about annoying or infuriating video game enemies, you'll find the original Red Dead Redemption's Cougar. It is true that that particularly cunning beast was a damn nightmare to best, but Rockstar's sequel takes that one step further with the White Cougar, which the player hunts during one of the debt-collecting side missions. Located inside a totally dark cave, the player enters with another NPC who's instantly devoured. Next, you have to run around in the dark until you hear the distinct growl of the cougar, at which point you have about 0.5 seconds to react, spot the animal, hit Deadeye mode, and strike the beast down with about 60 shotgun rounds. Because it's tied to a story mission every time you die, and you will die a lot, you'll have to listen to the same dialogue over and over again, only for another split-second chance of gunning the legendary animal down. This, combined with the darkness and speedy insta-kill attack, is almost enough to swear off hunting in Red Dead Redemption 2 entirely. Number 3. Imperial Guards, The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. The guards in Oblivion are frustrating because they punish the player before they even really learn the basics of the game. Once you leave the tutorial area, you'll no doubt encounter some of these guys on horseback, and like any self-respecting RPG player, there's a good chance that you'll end up trying your luck and attacking them to nab their swanky armor and weapons. Unfortunately for you though, not only are these quote-unquote enemies quite strong, but they do not forget any misgivings against them, or any misgivings at all actually. Once they're on your tail, they will chase you to the very ends of the earth. Skip town and try to escape to the next city? Well, they'll come running, most likely when you're engaged in dialogue. They are relentless in their pursuit, and the fact that they're essentially omniscient and know crimes you've committed even if there was no witnesses makes them the living embodiment of the wrath of God. Number 2. The Parasite Unit, Metal Gear Solid 5. For the most part, Metal Gear Solid 5 discards the boss battles from games gone by, and instead replaces them with the Parasite Unit, aka the Skulls, elite soldiers who stop at nothing to bring Venom Snake down. They show up every time the sequel is in need of a major set piece, at which point the game's focus on stealth mostly goes out the window in favor of you whipping out a bazooka and blowing these guys to smithereens. The issue with forced action in this series though is that most of the enemies Kojima pits you against are far faster and deadlier than you are, and can usually stunlock you to the point where you wonder whether it's even worth keeping hold of the controller because you're just going to die anyway. And not only are these guys cheap, but they're boring to boot. They're not exciting to fight, and there's no sense of achievement after, simply the gratitude that you can now move on to something actually fun. Number 1. Oh, the CAZADORES, Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas CAZADORES are, without a doubt and without any hyperbole, the worst enemies I have ever faced in a video game. These winged devils are found in the wastes of Obsidian's Mojave Desert and often hunt in packs. Even worse, they're pretty much all strengths and no weaknesses. Their sheer number can easily overwhelm, their ability to fly can quickly close the distance, they pack a damn punch with their stings, and they can also inflict, oh my god, poison damage. The icing on this turd cake, though, comes if you happen to be playing in hardcore mode, which I just want to say, I always do, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. Here, if companions are killed in combat, they don't simply bounce back, but are gone for good. As a result, CAZADORES become even more lethal, because even if you survive, there's a 99% chance that your teammate will either be outright dead or in the process of being poisoned to death. So you could scrape through a fight only to get the pop-up that your companion is dead meat 5 minutes later, forcing you to reload a save back to God knows when. Oh, and if you do notice that they're poisoned before they die, giving them a stim pack will only speed up their demise. I have no idea why, I don't know if this is a bug or what, but it sucks. Who the hell designed these creatures? My heart cannot take it.